like with the conversation in Black studies that has been around, right? Like the university, for example, being an anti-Black site, and yet, like, you know, there's still this, what Black studies scholars have called the undercommons, right? The space underneath the university where relationships are being built, where dreams are still kind of being cultivated in the midst of the university constantly trying to co-opt, suppress, restrict those dreams. So I wonder, and these universities come and go, right? Like the Guru Sahib would say, this world comes and goes. But I guess like, but I think instead what maybe is important, what lasts, what precedes the university, and what also kind of exceeds the university's life is that undercommons, is that kind of the underbelly in which these intercaste, interfaith, multiracial relationships are being cultivated. These relationships which are revolutionary in of themselves, because we are again dealing with these systems of 2,500 plus years whose significance has been that they have destroyed our capacity to be in relation with each other. These systems of apartheid that have restricted who you can be in community with, who you cannot be in community with, who you can talk to, who you can eat with, all these kind of scripts are laid out. So these relationships that are already being built where we are learning how to be in conflict with each other, how to be in relation with each other, how to learn from each other, that in itself is important, significant work already that the university doesn't actually intend for that work to be happening, but it's work that is happening in the undercommons. It is work that is happening outside of the capture of the university as well, that is informing the resistance against the university, is informing the organizing with and against the university, and it's also the type of work that moves way outside and has ramifications that transform individuals and the collectivity way beyond the university. So yeah, I think all I just say, I think thinking with that scholarship from Black Studies maybe is what was going on.
Can I just say something? Yes, clap. We were on a panel yesterday with Manmeet for the AAS, and they get so passionate and riled up, and we're just like, we feel like jumping up and down when Manmeet talks, because there's such a rebellious energy to the way Manmeet speaks. So thank you, Manmeet. Manish, did you want to add anything before I go on to
just
the
a small thing?
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for the great question, by the way, because university spaces are definitely one of our the most creative spaces of a student life, which shapes pretty much, how their future and how they want to see themselves moving forward. If you look into we call this new social movement in South Asia, Southeast Asia, especially universities, especially in Thailand, Hong Kong, other countries, has been very important spaces where a lot of these important recent social movement has brewed. And what's happening in a country like India now, or what's happening in South Asia, or in general here in Canada, it's equally important to acknowledge, yes, there is a struggle, and there will be a struggle, but we do know that that's where magic happens. And that's what makes this, I call it youth with, I don't know how to put it together, but in traditional Venus, we know that a reckless youth make a youthful age. If this is what being said, then university spaces does make young people more, vigilant, or it's much more stronger. And we know that when a university campus is going through such kind of change, especially driven by the young people, by the students, then we know that there's something beautiful coming ahead. I'm just hopeful, trying to be more positive on that.
Okay, we have maybe 2 more questions, Max. You've had your hand up for a while. Oh, you're pointing to...
Both of us can go one after another?
Sure.
Simultaneously? You go first. Just one quick question. It's fascinating panel, really enjoying the conversation. And within the university setup, have you experienced other aspects of the diaspora, like right-wing Hindutva groups, and how does that affect a lower caste or middle caste activism? And I'll leave it at that.
Should I add? Yeah, please. Okay, I have again, I'm coming from Pakistan, so we have a different context. We have 3 million Christians who converted from Dalit, majority of them converted from Dalit to Christianity. Not because Jesus Christ entered into their heart, but Christianity offered them an escape from the subjugation and discrimination by the upper caste. and they are still untouchables. It hasn't changed anything. Although they are Christians, apparently, but the majority of the Muslims, they treat them as untouchables. They don't know anything about Dalit anymore in Pakistan, but they do treat them as untouchables. Now the word that you are using, abolish the caste system. It's like you are suggesting something as we are going to abolish a class, a law, a constitution. You don't abolish culture. It can't be abolished. All we can do is to reform it or reform it. And again, another word that you use, the kindness. The kindness is, when it comes to the majority, us, the Muslims, who treat the Christians as untouchables, the kindness is in cultural context means condescending. We are kind, we feel good. We are kind towards. It doesn't change any reality on the ground. So I don't think it's a good word to use. Kindness. Don't expect kindness. Be aggressive if you want to bring a change. And secondly, we have to get out of this minority in peril discourse or narrative. It's self-victimized. It's like crime. Victim is crime. It gives us a player, a sadistic player. We have to move towards the majority accountability. Focus on the majority. And it is good if somebody from the majority, like himself, can come up and write a book and criticize his caste, so-called upper caste. But anyway,
I'll just confine the two questions, and if we can spend 5 minutes maximum, so 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes each, good luck. Quickly answer the question about resistance from right-wing Hindutva organizing, if you've ever experienced it, if you can quickly answer that, and then the much bigger question about just how we utilize language in doing this work. Is it abolition? Why do you utilize abolition? So maybe we'll start with me, yeah. Or whatever.
Okay, so just to begin with, so far when I arrived at UBC, we don't have had any organization per se, student organization supporting Hindutva in general or any of that. However, we just got one now, recently. Yes, it's a student body, but they are doing their, so-called activities. So I think this is a part of we call cultural, bring the cultural activities in the campus. So yes, definitely, but not personally that I have had any experience of that kind. So totally, I think that's where I would stop in that. And now coming back to this question of abolish and like this sort of language side of it. I understand that the language we use has its own so-called advantages and disadvantages. And the words like abolish or annihilation, and many such words when it comes to the question of caste being used historically by our own, like my own inspiration, Dr. Baker, and many such scholars, Dr. Hansen, like anyone. So what I personally feel that, yes, language holds the power, but now how we use that, in what context, in what segment is equally important. Now, I would personally speak to the question of kindness, the one that I was using, when it comes to, self-healing or the healing of, in general, process of that. So, I believe that being kind is not something that is feeling like I am, like, I will use some other famous quote here. So what is it like that? When you have a choice to be kind or be right, always be kind, then you will always be right. It's a contradictory, but when you look into the context in which it was used by the Dalai Lama, or many such kind of other scholars, what they're trying to say is that when it comes to self-kindness or self-compassion in general, the idea is not to work with others, but to work with our own self, our own human emotions. So that's what I'm referring here. And we know that even Dr. Baker, wrote in his book, Dharma, to work on the human mind, to cultivate the human mind is one of the best things one can do. So what the context here is basically, we are allowing this whole subtle development to work on ourselves first before. Otherwise, yes, scholarly work that we are doing is beautiful, but it's not going to go far unless or until we really go into those art spaces and find ways which truly kind of connect this new, we call Gen Z, Gen X, and whatever you can call them, and then let them know that, listen, it's an important question. It's not about knowing which caste I'm from, but knowing that this is not a question that we want to take it forward one more generation from hereafter. And we have been bearing this burden for so many years and thousands of years. And this morning in our keynote speech, we witnessed that how Dr. Sadi talking about this intergenerational trauma. I argue that caste is no longer an intergenerational. Actually, it's gone towards epigenetic level. So if we look closely, then we can see that caste is embedded in our psyche for more than thousands and thousands of years. So it has decoded our DNA in its own minute level. And in order to reverse that, the way to do it is there's no direct way, I call it myself, because I argue I'm also very much directly involved with Buddhism, with meditation, with mindfulness and stuff like that. And I argue that there's no direct way to reverse that. But social psychological side of research has proved that the way to reverse our psychology in this domain is through the simple practice of loving kindness, the simple practice of mindfulness. And therefore, as a future individual in this kind of spaces, we should also look into the various contemplative practices which would help us heal from this intergenerational or epigenetic level of trauma which caste brings to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manish. I was sorry, just to press it. No, thank you, Manish. I was actually reflecting on like with what you named of this need to kind of enter into all these different spaces, whether it's media, whether it's art, right? And I think like kind of building off of that, maybe I think to this question of where do we go from here? How do we think about the future? I am kind of coming at this question from just reflecting on the institutional life of kind of the anti-caste movement in the diaspora in terms of just kind of reflecting on the type of life that caste has kind of taken on within the academia in the past like 5 to like 7 years, right? Where it's gone from being, there was a time where like, in academia, like no one talked about caste, right? Like in terms of it was very hard to get a conversation forward about caste. Conversations on caste were actively suppressed, were actively erased. And then you kind of see this movement a couple of years ago within the university spaces, led by students, right? Led by young people to get caste added as a protected category to this work at large to kind of demand this attention on caste. And university spaces kind of then become a critical site to do that. And the strategy that gets kind of the strategy that ends up kind of winning out in that moment is the strategy of kind of institutionalizing caste protections, right? Which is really important as well, given that then adding caste as a protected category then ensures that the institution has some sort of responsibility to it. There's reporting channels. There's a lot of importance and significance to that. And I guess I'm just also then kind of thinking about kind of the after effects, right? Like, and kind of reflecting on where we're at today as we then think about where we go from here, of where in certain ways caste today has kind of become a trendy topic in academia, right? Where you see scholars who, for example, have built their entire careers, like seniors, on never having talked about caste, on maybe even having suppressed conversations on caste, who then are now eating up this conversation on caste or capitalizing on caste. So you kind of see the type of ways that like there's this capital that is accruing because of the particular ways that the university works to co-opt. Because at the end of the day, yes, the university is like an important site of learning, an important site of politicization, and at the same time, the university is a colonial settler institution, right? So it has its own agendas, it has its own kind of terms of recognition, and it will only give recognition when it suits its own interests, not necessarily when it suits the people, right? So anyways, but with that said, so I think in kind of reflecting on, I think where, like with what I spoke to earlier, right? The resistance, the caste and Brahmanism is 2,500 plus years old. The resistance against caste and Brahmanism is 2,500 plus years old. And we see that part of the violence of institutionality, the violence of like the institution has been of reducing that resistance down into just the into only the call to get caste added as a protected category, as opposed to kind of at a certain point within the university spaces, there was a more robust dreaming that was happening of what does a thorough anti-caste infrastructure looks like. Like what does it really look like to think about building big on Buddha, right? Like how do we truly take that demand seriously? And what does it look like for us to think about how do we materialize that in the context of the university? So there were all these sorts of conversations that were happening on what does it mean to engage caste in the classroom? What does it mean to engage caste within, like who is here to engage caste and who's not here? Like who is missing, right? Like in these spaces to start with, like there were kind of so many other conversations that were happening, but because the university kind of operates in this way where it kind of is not able to sit with tension, right? Like it just kind of makes everything static and stable, then like the entire kind of, so much of kind of the robust imaginings got reduced down to just this call to get caste added as a protected category, which is not to say that's not important, it is, but I guess what I'm also speaking to is in moving forward, how do we revive and how do we support kind of that other dreaming work that was happening on how do we kind of more expansively imagine our demands, our asks, when we think about what anti-caste work looks like within the university space, which like I know there's been kind of different efforts, for example, at the UC Collective for Caste Abolition at UC San Diego, there were kind of similar types of dreaming works that were happening on like how to kind of think about in addition to the call to get caste added as a protected category, what are additional things that we can be asking, that we can be dreaming, that we can be building in order to work towards caste abolition? So I think all that to say, I think like to that question of the future, I think I wanted to kind of uplift that type of kind of effort that's been also happening in university spaces, maybe in a little bit more and that conversation has been a bit maybe more marginalized as well, about this need to think about what an anti-caste infrastructure as opposed to just an ask for caste protections looks like, but how do we incorporate the ask for caste protections within a larger dreaming so that the resistance is not captured within just one demand.
So we do have about 10 minutes for Q&A. We would like to open up the floor for you to ask questions to any of our amazing panelists. We'll start with Sasha.
Hi, thank you so much. This is a really amazing panel, and I learned so much from all of you. I wanted to ask about, since the topic of universities is so central to our thinking about dreaming and this infrastructure that you're speaking about, I'm thinking about like 2026. The university is being dismantled, higher education is being targeted, is being actively repressed, questions of academic freedom, we're thinking about what is next for universities. And I wonder, how do we dream within the confines that we're given in this very neoliberal university that is organized as a corporation to think through what anti-caste work can look like today? And I was really moved, Monique, by your conversation about students. And students are incredible. They're so powerful in moving the administration, and this has historically happened. And as you know, in the United States, like thinking about San Francisco State University and the university's students called for self-determination. And I think self-determination is so much around what you're thinking about, Monique, in terms of abolition. So I'm wondering, for any of the panelists to think about, like, how do we kind of like work within all of these restraints?
I think like something that I was kind of thinking about actually as you spoke to the attacks on higher education is thinking.
We go out and work on others or work against others.
Manish, I'm going to stop you there to give Manmeet the last word, and then we're going to head off into the next session. So, go for it.
I think, sorry, I'll go really fast too, but I think, no, thank you both for your questions. I think maybe I'll speak to your question first, and then I think it'll tie into your question too. I think the use of the language of abolition, right, comes from Black liberation. So I think it is one of those efforts by to create those solidarities between the Dalit liberation, anti-caste liberation, and Black liberation when we tie emancipation and abolition together, right? So now, what does abolition mean, though, right? And I totally hear you. I feel like it does bring up these ideas of burning things down. But as Black studies scholars, as abolitionist scholars have clarified, abolition is not just about absence; it's about presence. It's about, yes, there are things that need to be burned down, there are things that need to be built. Abolition is about both. It's about that burning things down and about the cultivation. Like, it's about what conditions do we need to grow such that the very systems that we currently have in place no longer are needed. So when we think about abolishing prisons, yes, abolish prisons, and what else do we also need to build so that the very conditions that necessitate presence can be tended to. So I think it's both. We have to think about what absence do we need and what presence do we need to cultivate as well. So I think, with what you said, aggression, yes, and it's not one or the other. Kindness and the love, too, all of it, right? Like, so it's not just one strategy or the other. We're going to need all of it. We need the absence, and we need what we need to build, which I think goes actually to your second question of like, what does the Hindutva organizing has been at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, which was the undergraduate university that I went to. It was kind of one of the universities that in the California State University system did add caste as a protected category, and the CSU San Luis Obispo was one of the universities that was kind of in the public spotlight for kind of. Anyways, but when I left, a Hindu Yuva chapter was established at my campus. That chapter did not, and for folks who may not know, the Hindu Yuva is an organization that is connected with like VHP, RSS, HSS, right? Like, it's a part of all these networks. So we see that and actually just recently, there was a couple of years ago, a memo that was leaked, I think, from the Indian conflict that was saying that these are the sectors of movement work that need to be policed. Anti-caste work, Kashmiris, Sikhs. So as we just kind of think about how this is speaking to the way that things are interconnected here, right? The work, the anti-Hindutva, the Hindutva organizing is not only concerned with and threatened by the anti-caste organizing. It's being threatened by these other movements. It's being threatened by Kashmiri Muslims. It's being threatened by Sikhs asking for sovereignty. So how do we think about what is the relationship between all of these? And of course, there's contradictions, so many tensions there too, but how do we think about the building, that hard work of building that needs to take place in order for us to think about materializing Begumbuddha, right?
Thank you. No, you did it. Thank you so much. Please speak to them after. Sorry for running late, Jay.
Well done. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay.